Here at 888 Ride, we go above and beyond. Today, we're headed to Los Angeles to pick up poker superstar Maria Ho. She is the first 3-time guest in 888 Ride. She is an absolute superstar, Hall of Famer, WPT. She's done it all. Let's go get her. You are, by the way, you were the first 3-time guest in 888 Ride.
Yeah, I just found that out earlier, and I'm like, that's pretty cool, because I still remember, like, I very vividly remember doing it with you, and it was so much fun.
I mean, we've done Canes.
Yeah.
Check it. You did karaoke.
Yeah.
And you, like, were all in, which is, by the way, just so awesome. Like, I ask other people, I'm like, hey, we do, like, karaoke, and they're like, no, they're too embarrassed. And you just jumped right into Baby Got Back.
Yeah. Again, that's me. Just saying yes.
Saying yes.
Being open.
Apparently you were the all-time winningest woman in World Series poker history until Liv stole this from you. And I know you and Liv are bitter enemies, right?
I'm super happy for her. But it just gives me like a good benchmark to go for now,
Right. And I know you're in the Hall of Fame, Women's Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. What about the Poker Hall of Fame?
So you have to be 40 to be eligible, I believe. I'm not actually quite sure.
It is, yes,
so
40.
I just, I'm 41. And are you asking like my thoughts on?
Your thoughts on, is this something that's important to you? Is this something from a legacy standpoint? You've done so much, you've achieved so much from not only on the felt, but off the felt. You're such a huge part of what poker is. And I'm wondering, to me, it almost feels like a disservice to even say, oh, you're in the Women's Hall of Fame. It's like, why aren't you in just the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I would be very honored to be in the regular Hall of Fame, of course, but I also look at it as, I understand that there's a huge backlog of like very deserving people. And so, I never want to say my accomplishments are better or more worthy than someone else's. I think, all of the people that are in the conversation are all incredibly worthy to be inducted. And so, yeah, of course, I hope one day I will have my turn, but it's not something that I think I'm necessarily
You're so nice.
gunning for.
Look at you're like just so politically correct and nice. No, I mean, and I don't say it as a, hey, it's not you over somebody. And that's actually, it's one of the reasons I have a problem with the Hall of Fame, because it has become a this person over that person
more deserving,
thing.
right.
As opposed to just, no, is this person deserving on their own merit? This is not a comparison game now.
Right. But that's what happens when you're only, inducting one a year. And especially, in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a plethora of new poker talent that cropped up after, the moneymaker effect, right? So what do you do about that?
I mean, you think of the crop of players that are going to be eligible this year and next year. Mm-hmm. And you have to wonder, at what point does the Hall of Fame decide one entry is not enough a year?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting debate that I feel like, there's arguments for both sides, but, to me, I think that it's nice to have something that kind of, to etch your name alongside some of, poker's greats. But I also feel like if that never happened for me, it doesn't diminish what I've done either, so.
I agree. Okay. So you look back at your poker career, and, we're talking, you've been playing for a while, obviously. I mean,
I appreciate you not just like calling out how long I've been playing. So
I've been commentating. I have been commentating on you for a ridiculous amount of time.
Yep.
Whether with you or on, or when you're on the felt.
True.
So when you look back at your career now, and obviously it's not over, it's just, it's just a body of work that's continuing. But when you look back and you see all the World Series of Poker cashes, over 80, you look at the plethora of times where you were the last woman standing. I think your best finish was 37th in the main event. And you look back at that, you look at the WPT title. Is there a moment in your poker career that you're most proud of, whether it be on the felt or off the felt?
You know, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is honestly that I have, in a game where I think it's a revolving door, sometimes I feel like I'm proud of staying the test of time. So it's not really like one thing. It's just the fact that I'm still here after all this time doing it, and I feel like I'm still improving and getting better with each year. I haven't allowed myself to get complacent. So, you know, my barometer is really just like measuring myself up against, you know, how good I was the year before, instead of looking at it as like a scoreboard of how much money I've won, or, you know, what my best, you know, finish and my biggest title is. But, you know, if I did have to pick one thing, I would say it was being inducted into the Women in Poker Hall of Fame, just because, again, I think having that, having your peers validate the things that you've done in the industry that you've spent my whole adult's life, right? I've never really had a career outside of poker. And so it really validates the time that I've put into this. So I would say that that would be maybe my one thing. But I think overall it really is just, you know, staying the test of time.
Are you better today than you were 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. And it's almost embarrassing when I think of, you know, 10 years ago, I had already been playing professionally for, you know, 6 or 7 years. And when I look back at how I was 10 years ago, I'm like, I feel like I was terrible compared to, you know, how much better I feel like I am now. And even though the competition has gotten a lot tougher and exponentially tougher, I would say, I still feel like I have tried to stay ahead of the curve, right? And I think, again, it's because I don't like to be complacent. I'm never the type of person to, you know, say like, well, I know what I know and that seems to be good enough, because I'm always kind of wanting to level up and make sure that I'm working hard and feeling like I deserve to kind of be in the position that I am. And so, you know, I have a good work ethic. I feel like a very strong work ethic. And so I feel like I've tried really hard to stay with the times and work on my game.
Was there an epiphany over the last several years that kind of upped your game? Was there a moment where you were like, I don't know much? I'll give you an example. So many years ago, I was covering a tournament in Italy, and I was doing commentary with Jason Mercier. And I remember doing commentary, and we had no hole cards at the time, so it's a while ago. And Jason, somebody made a bet or a raise, whatever it was, and Jason goes, I don't like that bet. And I was like, what do you mean you don't like that? You don't know what he has. How do you know if you don't like that bet? And then he went through an entire explanation of, well, if he has this, I don't like it. If he does this, I don't like it. And he went through this entire explanation, no matter what hand he has, based on the range of hands he has and the range of hands his opponents has, why this player should not be making this play at this particular moment. And that was the moment in my eyes I went, I need to get to work. I know nothing about this game. And whether I'm commentating or playing, I need to do some work.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably similar to you, I've had a few moments where I've heard other people talk about poker, whether it's just in a casual discussion of a hand history or, you know, maybe on a live stream, where I'm like, wow, the way that they are speaking about poker, it's, you know, almost feels like a foreign language to someone who feels like they already know so much.
You're probably listening to my commentary, aren't you?
No, it's always you. It always goes back to you.
Thank you. I mean, as long as we realize that this is all about me.
It is all
okay.
about you.
And don't worry, I have plenty more questions that are centered about me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of that. I think it's also a little bit of just being at the table and playing against people where you just watch how they maneuver in a hand and you can just see that they have unlocked something that you haven't unlocked yourself. And so, you know, just being able to play against so many great players has really made me have that realization of, you know, I need to step up my game if these are the people that I'm competing against on a regular basis. And I've definitely been inspired by people like Seidel and Negreanu, who, you know, despite having accomplished so much already in their career, they have still been able to reinvent themselves in the game and still been able to compete at the highest levels and in the highest stakes against the best in the world and still be able to hold their own, whereas a lot of their counterparts, people who played and grew up in the same era of poker as they did, you know, they've really fallen off.
You're talking about Phil Hellmuth.
I mean, you know, Hellmuth, white magic is not really something you can teach, right? So,
No.
you know, he's got his own brand of what he's working with.
However you want to define it, it seems to work. I mean, there's just too often like, hey, scoreboard,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Do you ever miss kind of the innocent old days where you grinded a limit hold'em?
I think I miss the old days in general just because I feel like the love for poker was so much more pure when it wasn't about the money, right? When I used to play limit hold'em, that was like very early on before I turned pro, you know, and I also played limit hold'em when I was a professional for the first few years before I found tournaments. And there was just this feeling where there was nothing I would rather do in the whole wide world than go play poker. You know, if there was a free moment in my day, the first thing I would go do is play poker. And I could stay at the card room for 12, 14, 18, 24-hour sessions just to grind back like $100 loss.
Did you just
right?
love the gamble?
I love the game so much. And it's not that I don't love the game still, but I love it in a different way, right? It's just, again, when you weren't doing it for the money or when you weren't doing it for your own ego, right? To like try to top the last thing you did or whatever the reason might be, that, you know, sometimes that competition that fuels us and that we thrive off of, but it sometimes takes away from the enjoyment, right? Because now I'm also so much harder on myself when I don't do well. Whereas before, if I had a losing session, I still could say I had a lot of fun doing it. I can't really say the same now, right?
Right. I one of my favorite things was when I first came up in commentary, I would commentate on you playing limit hold'em against the likes of like Crazy Mike and these characters that just seemed bigger than life to me, but it was palpable and obvious to anybody who saw that how much you love the game. Like, you loved it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely was the first real competitive outlet I've ever found, because growing up culturally with my background, you know, my Tiger mom and my Chinese, very strict education focused upbringing, there was no room for extracurricular activities. It was always about schoolwork. It was always about prioritizing our education. So I never got to participate in sports growing up or other things like that, where I feel like at a young age you start learning that level of, you know, how to unleash kind of your competitive side. But I always had it in me. I just didn't have an outlet for it. And when I found poker, that was the first time that it really tapped into that part of me that I wasn't able to explore when I was younger.
Okay, I want to get back to poker, obviously, but I do want to turn our attention to Tiger Mom and growing up. You know, you moved to Arcadia,
Yeah.
right, when you were 4?
Yeah, I moved
5?
to the States when I was 4.5, and then we moved to kind of the LA area when I was maybe 7. We
Where
went
were
to New
you?
York first, to
Oh,
Syracuse.
okay.
Yeah.
You were in Syracuse. Okay, wow. Okay, that's like my old stomping grounds.
Yeah, I know.
That's pretty cool. Okay, but do you remember much of Syracuse? Not really.
Not really. I was so young.
Yeah.
Just that it was cold.
And story checks out. It's still cold.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. So you moved to Arcadia, and what was growing up with a Tiger Mom like in Arcadia?
I mean, it was a lot of just kind of imposing what she wanted for us, right? Like, there wasn't a lot of freedom. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. It wasn't like we really got to choose what we wanted to do. It was like everything in our life was planned out for us, not just in the moment, but until we were like 40, right? It's like, this is what you're going to do. Then you're going to go to this college. Then you're going to major in this. And then you're going to grow up to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? It was very regimented, but it all comes from a good place of the fact that obviously we are an immigrant family, and my parents uprooted their whole lives to try to give me and my sister a better life here in America. So of course they would want to see all of those sacrifices come to fruition for their daughters, because they feel like they were trying to set us up for success, and success looked a very specific way to them, right?
Right, what success looks like. So right now, obviously, you're older, and you can look back at this and reflect, and I guess understand that your mother's desires and wishes and demands of you and your sister were well intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up with that, how difficult was that?
I mean, it was incredibly difficult, which is why I grew up as a bit of a rebel, right? Because it was me trying to fight back against all of, that.
By the way, I had so many Asian friends growing up
Yeah.
that they all smoked. They were all like smokers and this, and they would basically come out and be like, and you found out it was basically because they were trying to be rebels against their parents.
Right. It's like you want to fight back against all of that structure. And also, I think a lot of why I wanted to be a rebel too was because my sister really conformed to all of the things, and so it just made me want to go to the extreme end of the spectrum and say, okay, well, if you have somehow gotten my sister to kind of comply to everything that you are expecting of us, then it gives me less of a reason to want to do it. She's already fulfilled a lot of their expectations. And also because I think deep down inside, it was probably just my way of, I didn't think I could live up to their expectations. So it was easier to be a rebel. It was easier to say I didn't care and I'm not going to get straight A's, not because I can't, but because I don't want to, when maybe it was me feeling like I couldn't fulfill it, right?
Right, so it's almost just sabotage yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Just
a little
to
bit
avoid
of
actually failing.
For sure.
That's interesting. When you started to kind of dive into poker and gambling and decided that maybe this was a career for you, how much backlash was there from your mom?
I mean, there was definitely a good amount of backlash because, again, I think your parents only want the best for you, and their idea of what's best for you might be very different from what your idea of what's best for you is, because especially when you're young, like my idea of what's best for me is kind of like letting me do whatever I want to do, right? But they can see like a bigger picture. And although, she definitely didn't agree with my choices, and I think it felt like a disappointment to her because, again, they feel like they invested so much into our future and they gave up so much for our future that I think she couldn't really fathom that this is what I saw myself doing with my life. But again, because I did have that rebel attitude, it didn't deter me. I think some people, once they get a certain level of backlash or they don't have a certain level of support from their loved ones, they might be like, all right, I'll change course, right? Because it feels really hard to continue on a path when you're not getting any support. But I think that actually fueled me to keep going and to kind of succeed, to prove them wrong. So in some ways I have them to thank, because I feel like there were times when I did think like, wow, playing poker for a living is hard. I don't know if I want to keep going. But just because I didn't want to have to go back to my parents and tell them they were right, I forced myself to play through the times when there were self-doubt or the times when I was going on a downswing and I mentally didn't want to keep going, right?
You put a tweet out there about uncomfortable conversations. I want to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. And anybody who knows you how much you absolutely love your sister. Yeah. I mean, your adoration for your sister first of all, I'm jealous of it. I literally reach out to my own sister and I'm like, can you love me as much as Maria loves her sister, please? But was there a moment growing up where you resented your sister and hated her for being perfect and conforming, and then you were the bad? Like
1,000%. Like I I took it so personally where I would feel like she would almost, I was like, she's doing this to try to make me look bad, you know, instead of me feeling like, oh, she's just doing this because she's an overachiever or because she really cares about what my parents think or whatever. You know, I almost thought that she was like doing it to spite me. That's how resentful and upset with her I was. But our relationship has done a complete 180. Like, first of all, you know, we weren't very close growing up, not just because our personalities were so different, but because of our age gap. Like, she's 4 years older than me. So, you know, it's just kind of right at that age where we never went to school together. You know, she was always moving on to, like, you know, high school when I would go into middle school and this, that, and the other.
It's funny, by the way, because 4 years for boys is like 4 months, but 4 years for girls is like 20 years.
Right. And so, you know, we just weren't that close growing up for like the reasons that I've stated. But I think especially when I got older, I just realized how much I looked up to her, just because my sister is so incredibly self-motivated and she's so good at so many different things. And so like this idea of like maybe almost like jealousy turned into just like adoration, right? And so I kind of think, you know, you just get older and you realize that, you know, it's just us two. So it's just so nice to have a sibling, and you just appreciate that relationship so much more when you're older. And I just trust her with anything. And I also, again, I just really admire her, and I feel like the work that she's doing is also so important that all I want to do is support her.
Was there a moment, I want to go back to your parents for a second, was there a moment where your parents were proud of you?
You know, it's funny because I think, and this is probably not just, you know, my parents. I think other people can relate that they might have parents that do something similar. I think some parents are way more hesitant to tell you that they're proud of you, but they'll tell their friends, or they'll talk about you in, you know, in a very positive way and paint you in a very positive light to other people, but they almost don't want to say that to you because they're afraid that it might make you, you know, work less hard or be less ambitious or whatever it is. So it's like there are definitely moments in my life where my parents have like said the words, "I'm proud of you." It's not really ever related to like career stuff. It's really just like the person that I've grown to become, or it'll be, you know, like the way I handled a situation or a crisis, you know?
Right. Was there something, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, growing up as the non-conforming, rebellious child, and the way you and your parents might have, you know, butted heads growing up, was there a moment that you kind of remember where you connected and you just realized that, okay, they approve of my life, they are okay with the choices I've made?
I think approval is a really big word. I don't know if my parents necessarily will ever approve, but I think they've reached a level of acceptance. Okay. And I think they are happy for me in the sense that they feel like I'm doing what I want to do, and I've created a life for myself where, you know, where I have certain liberties that they didn't have and they weren't fortunate enough to have, which is, you know, they kind of had to do what they needed to do to get us here and to get us to this point. But what's beautiful is because they did that and gave up so much, my sister and I are able to pursue things that we really love now, right? Whereas maybe they didn't have those freedoms.
Right, yeah. You had the freedom to make decisions they would never make. Right. Which is pretty amazing, and obviously the sacrifice they made.
Yeah. And so I think they're
Are you close with them today?
That. Yes, I'm very close with my parents. I mean, to me, family is everything. And so, you know, even though my parents aren't necessarily the type of people that I consider myself like a very open person, and I think I'm so open because my parents are not the same way. You know, they're not as communicative, and they're not as in touch with their emotions. But
well, I mean, you're one of the most public people out there, period. I mean, I've never heard you say no to anything. It's like, hey, let's do this. Yes. I asked you to do some CNBC stock show with me. Sure. You know, it was like, you're always the yes.
Kind of like down for whatever, you know?
That's what I mean. You're always, so, you know, if you're comparing your parents or anybody to you, anybody's closed off compared to you.
Yeah, but I think, it kind of has resulted in an interesting dynamic in my relationship with them, where I think I don't have the same expectations. I don't have this expectation that everything is always going to be reciprocated. How much I open up to them or how much I communicate with them, I don't necessarily think they're going to give that right back to me. But I have come to a place where I'm just happy to have the time with them, and like I love them so much that you just kind of start letting go of kind of the expectations you might have on your parents to maybe be a certain way with you, and you just kind of accept them for who they are.
But yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, my parents just always embarrassed me, and then I finally realized, I was like, okay, I can't take responsibility for everything they do.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, that's who they are, and that's them, and it's not me, and I guess,
And they're not necessarily like a direct reflection of you either, and it's like,
Yeah.
It's just like allowing people to be their own person.
So what's next? I mean, you've done so much, whether it's Deal or No Deal, Amazing Race, broadcaster, you MC, charity events, and shows. You've won a Global Poker Award, the Hall of Fame. You've won a WPT title. What is next? Like, you look at the last, decade and a half, in the first 40 years of your life, and you kind of look at it and go, what does the next 40 years look like? What does the next 10 years look like for Maria Ho?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a bit of like an existential crisis sometimes of just like thinking, okay, what is next? And, where do I go from here? And I feel like
So is there a midlife crisis coming?
For sure. Coming. I think it's already here.
Oh, okay, we're in it.
I think we're in it. But I think
My wife donates her time at a wolf sanctuary, so she works with wolves once a week.
Wow.
That's her midlife crisis.
Wow.
So
I love that. I could totally see her doing
you could
that.
do, yeah, no, see, that's her, 100%.
Makes total sense.
Maybe. So what's a midlife crisis for you?
I mean, I think it's just about kind of, interestingly enough, you mentioned how I just, I'm a yes person, and how I kind of am willing to take anything on, and I'm just very open-minded and this, that, and the other. And I think I still am all those things, but I think these last couple of years specifically, I've just wanted to kind of focus a little more inward. And I think like before, a lot of my accomplishments and achievements and accolades, that was driven by this idea of, probably wanting to like leave behind a legacy, or, to do something where my parents will feel proud of me. And I feel like I've realized I've never had a chance to stop and just kind of enjoy it, right? Because I was always chasing the next thing, and a little bit of it is ego driven too, because a part of you is always like, okay, I have to do more. I have to do more, because like if I don't do more, then no one's going to care about what I did last year. People are only going to care about what you're doing today. And I feel like I've never really stopped and just taken a breath and just allowed myself to enjoy what I have done already. And so these last couple of years, I've really like turned inward, and it's really about like more self-improvement, but also like looking at what my next 40 years of my life is going to look like, right? And, I definitely don't think that the next 40 years of my life is going to consist of the insane amount of traveling and the insane amount of, work that I've done in the last 20 years. And so if that's the case, then it's kind of like, what is going to make me happy in the long run? And so just kind of reshifting priorities, and spending a lot of time with my family. I'm just also realizing, my parents are definitely at the age where I don't know how many more good years I'm going to have left with them.
Right.
And so, when you're faced with that reality too, it's like, is it that important to go and travel across the world for that next big tournament, for the next big score? Would I care more about spending my time that way, or spending my time with the people that I love and the people that, really like fill my day to day and my heart a lot more than, just what poker can give me?
From a poker perspective, what, obviously we all know you from, on screen, we know your voice from broadcasting. How much of that do you love? How much of that will you continue doing, you think? Or are you going to be saying no to some of that as well?
No, I think I'll definitely still be doing that. I think, maybe just scale back a little bit in terms of, how often I do it. But, let me just make sure that I'm setting the record straight. I still love poker tremendously and will still play poker until...
Just don't call her anymore and don't bother her because she doesn't want to do it anymore, okay? Maria needs some her time, okay? It's her time now, okay? It's not your time, it's her time.
No, I'll still enjoy knocking you out of the WSOP main event.
You know what?
Dave.
Really? By the way, is that your greatest accomplishment? Your greatest poker accomplishment?
You're right. I'm surprised that wasn't the first thing that came to mind.
Knocking me out day 4
yeah.
of the main event?
Yeah.
Ouch.
So I'm still going to be playing poker, and I still love the broadcasting piece. I still love, doing commentary. I love doing things in front of the camera. Like, I kind of still want to do it all, but I just want to have a better work-life balance, basically, right? Which is something that I did not have, which was by my own design, right? So I think I'm just kind of looking for more of a work-life balance, but poker will still be such a big part of my life. And, and there are still so many other things I want to accomplish outside of poker as well. Like, I have, other passions. I have like this deep desire to be an entrepreneur. So like, I want to think about, ways in which I can either infuse some of my poker background into a business.
What kind of business?
Also, that's the thing, is like, I don't know what that business is. I just know that I want to create and start and build something from the ground up. I want to have that feeling of satisfaction of planting the seed and watering it and seeing it grow.
Right. Metaphorically, we don't want to build a garden, but
no,
right.
I don't have a green thumb.
No. Okay. Fair enough. That's I like that. Something that's really cool. I'm a big, TED Talk fan. I just think they're amazing. And I know late in 2024, you got the opportunity to do one. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So it was actually really cool because, again, of course I'm going to find a way to pump up my sister a little bit more because that's just how much I love and adore her. But it's funny because she actually did a TED Talk a couple of months before I did mine. She was asked to do one, and then maybe 3 weeks later after she was asked.
It all comes back to parent approval. So your sister got to do one, and
I
you were like,
had to.
I have to do it now, otherwise mom's going to love you more.
Basically.
Right.
So that's why, my sister just sets the bar, and I just have to try to, match it.
It's a high bar.
It is a very high bar. And then I got asked to apply to be a speaker as well for a different venue. And so I was like, okay, not really thinking much of it. Like, again, I love being challenged. And so all of these things that I've said yes to in the past, like, they scare me, but I still say yes because I want to prove to myself that I can do it. So obviously there are certain stipulations, like, okay, it has to be between 15 and 20 minutes long. You have to have it memorized. And I was definitely very worried and nervous at just how daunting this could be. But I just went into it, guns blazing. I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Oh, I know, I could just forget my whole speech in front of everybody. But I just wanted to take on the challenge, and I actually just recently got the news that, so my TED Talk was on like decision making and how to think like a poker player and how to make decisions, with incomplete information and being under the gun with, a lot of pressure and not a lot of time to make it. And so I just got the news that my TEDx Talk is going to be one of the editor's picks, which means it's going to be like featured on the front page of the TED site.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, like I was in there worried about just, whether or not I could deliver and memorize a 17-minute speech, and now, they liked it enough where they want to feature it.
That's
so
amazing.
That feels good.
I asked Maria to help out my wife's school and also my kids' school because we had a casino night, and to raise money, Maria was nice enough to donate your time and talk to one of the students.
Yeah.
And there was a man who bid on it, and then you actually spoke to his daughter. Mm-hmm. And that's just the kind of person you are. I mean, it's honestly, I I have so much respect and love for you and what you've done. But I guess my question for you is advice for everybody out there when facing fear and you're terrified of doing something, whether it's talking in public or whether it's, starting a business. How do you approach that? Because you just admitted, I mean, you are afraid. But how do you face that fear and just go, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway?
I think it's about just having the mindset that failure is not a bad thing, right? I think society and probably our parents teach us that failing is almost something that you never want to have to experience. But I feel like poker has really allowed me to not be afraid of failure, because every day I'll play a tournament and make a mistake and I will immediately, realize and see the repercussions of the mistake I made. And then I have to go back in there, and maybe sometimes it doesn't take me out of the tournament, right? I don't lose my entire stack. And then I have to sit there with whatever is left of my decimated stack because of a failed bluff or a failed line that I took, and I have to be able to pull myself back together and try to spin it back up and try to continue to play a good enough game to kind of allow me to continue in the tournament. And I think it's really set me up for this mindset that like every time I've failed, I've learned something from it, and it's made me that much better and that much more prepared for the next time. And so it's just, failure has made me a very resilient person, and I've learned that over and over again because I've failed so many times in poker. And so I think it's just to shift your mindset about the way that you look at failure and realize that it's not something to be afraid of. It's something that is going to be able to teach you a lot, not only about whatever it is that you're doing, but about yourself as well. And so now I think I just don't have that fear, and without that fear, it doesn't hold me back. And it also just gives me these opportunities when I think I might fail and I don't, to just prove myself wrong, right?
I'm gonna clip that and show it to my boys. I hope you don't mind. That's beautiful, and I think it's great. I always say to them, like, I hate people that say don't be afraid, because you can't control that. Like, that's just like don't be jealous, don't be afraid. It's like, no, but I'm always like, be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
But totally. I think it's such a great advice to just go, what's the worst that'll happen? You'll fail.
Yeah.
And if you're not fair to failure, then who cares?
Right.
I love that. Okay, my last question, I'm going to drop you off, and I want to thank you for all of your time. You're amazing. I will ask you this final question, and it's a really, really important one, okay?
All right.
Because you have, you've been a broadcaster for such a long time, and you've obviously played for such a long time, and you've listened to so much commentary, and you've worked with some of the best in the business. You've worked with Lon McCarron. You've worked with Ali Najad. You've worked with Jeff Platt. I mean, you've worked with the best out there. But who is the best, and why is it me?
Dave, you are obviously the best because you are probably the first person to ever do commentary on me. And I feel like you did nothing but sing my praise and speak so highly of me that how could I not think you are the absolute best commentator that I have personally ever heard.
There you go. Maria, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck to you in your next 40 years.
Thank you. I mean, I hope that, the list of things that I'm able to accomplish doesn't stop here. But most of all, I'm just happy about the person that I've become, and I hope that I keep, improving in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.